Good morning. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. So finish up your food and visiting and we'll get underway. Good morning. Can you all take your seats, please? I can't even get it that quiet that fast in my house, and there's only two of us. Welcome. Before I forget, make sure your cell phones are muted, if you would, please. Welcome to Power Breakfast 2023. I'm Greg Four. I will serve as your host and your MC today. It seems like I say this every year, but once again, we're blessed with a record-breaking crowd coming together to hear the most up-to-date information from some of the most trusted sources that have an impact on our industry. I want to thank each of you for coming out this early in the morning to show your support for this year's Power Breakfast, an event that continues to be an important industry and community gathering. The organizing committee wants to thank RV Business Magazine for facilitating the Power Breakfast, a duty they have performed since the inception of the breakfast. And we want to give our thanks to our honored sponsors, those who make it possible for this breakfast to take place. I will mention them in alphabetical order. Please hold your applause till the end. Eric Sell, Cummins, Dometic, Forest River, KOA, RVDA, RVIA, Spartan Chassis, Thor Industries, Wells Fargo, and Winnebago Industries. Let's have a big hand. As I thought about how to frame today's gathering in terms of our nation and our economy and our industry, it occurred to me that America's Vice President Harris, in an April 2023 quote, put it as good as anyone can. Here's what she said, and I quote, So I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist in our present, and to be able to contextualize it and to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past, but the future. Now look, I've been in this industry for over 50 years, and if that doesn't describe it to a T, okay? That's exactly, she said absolutely nothing of any sense, and that's exactly what we deal with in this industry over time, okay? So anyway, today all of us continue to adjust our businesses to the realities of the market. Struggles continue with 22 model year inventory and the inventory mix on dealers' lots as the buyer has and continues to transform since the COVID spike dissipated. Manufacturers and suppliers continue sizing their business to production rates that frankly are about half of what they were 1 year ago, and all the while maintaining their focus on new and better for the future of RV products. Campgrounds, as I'm sure we'll hear from KOA today, continue to prosper and attract investment as consumers continue to look for more ways to use and enjoy their RVs. And what's amazing to me, in spite of all the right sizing that's going on in our industry, is that the unemployment rate in northern Indiana continues to show a very tight labor market, and there's very little indication that there's any improvement on the way. Our lineup of presenters and speakers today may be one of the best and most timely in the history of the Power Breakfast. I believe from the industry panel to the governor to KOA and to Peter Morici, we will all hear thoughts and ideas that will help our business decisions in the days ahead. As we move toward our first presentations, a couple of topics I'd like to comment on. Craig Kirby, president of RVIA, was originally scheduled to be part of the industry panel this morning, but he is attending the Australian RV meetings this week, and James Ashurst, executive VP of RVIA, will be ably taking his place. Also, one of our well-known industry veterans, and I don't know if he's in the crowd today, I only bring it up because it's very new, from Newmar, John Samudas announces retirement from active duty at the end of May. John, is John here? Well, the hell with him. Clap anyway. And while not new news, I simply want to make note of the transfer of ownership of G&G Media Group, including the RV business operations, in February of this year. At that time, my partner and former RV business publisher, Sherm Goldenberg, and I sold the entity to new owners, RV business publisher Rick Kessler and his partner Scott Stropke. Sherm and Scott and Rick, would you please stand? On a more sobering note, I'd like to take a moment for all of us to remember those from our industry brethren that we've lost in the past year. There was Mike Snell, and more recently it was Malin Miller from Newmar, and unfortunately just a week ago, Aram Kultukian, president of KZ, passed away suddenly. Adding to that, there have been many others that have made great contributions over the years who also left this world in the past months. And for Mike, Malin, and Aram, and all the others, let's observe their memories with a moment of silence. Thank you. At the end of Mr. Morici's presentation to close the breakfast, I want to remind you that approximately 10 or 15 minutes following that, we're going to have a More with Morici right here at the stage, where Peter will be on hand to answer questions and intermix with those of you who are interested in sticking around. So please plan on that. This morning, we are fortunate to have a man uniquely qualified to welcome us all to Elkhart and the RV Power Breakfast. Large in stature and large in actions, Garvin Robertson has been an Elkhart cheerleader and supporter all his life. Please join me in welcoming Elkhart's mayor, Mr. Rod Robertson. Oh, Jesus. You snuck up on me.
How you doing, big guy?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Well,
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Governor. How are you? Good. I'll see you a little later as well. For all of you who don't know me, not only am I the mayor, but I'm also born and raised in Elkhart. Love it. And I'm an alumni. So from Tom Corson and Dot to Mike Turlip, Claire Skinner, Mike Baer, Chuck Green, Kelly Cummins, names that you may know or may not, but wonderful people in the industry. They really helped to provide me with what I call the resilience that's so necessary in the position that I am in. I'm really here to welcome you, but I can't help to tell you a little bit about my story. when I was with Coachman, I learned about so many of you others who was with Coachman as well, and how it helped to shape a legacy that continues to exist today. So when I'm around the state, around the county, around the city, hanging out with my boys, I'm talking about how resilient we are and what a wonderful community that we're from. I just love it. So for all of you who want to be mayor, I guess you can. So if you want to trade places with me, I'm welcome to bring you on board. Now, I don't see any takers out there. I get it. I think we all in public service understand what we do. But I can't help to be a cheerleader for you. Back when I graduated from high school, Elkhart was the wealthiest city per capita in the United States. Wealthiest city per capita in the United States. And we had 3 industries that was driving it. Of course, the industry that I'm speaking to now. But for those of you who haven't been around, if you ever played a band instrument, you probably purchased it for Conn-Selmer. If you have ever had an Alka-Seltzer, which I'm sure a couple of you have after a Louisville meeting, or wherever the shows are now, Alka-Seltzer was created right here in Elkhart. Flint's, Chalks, one-a-days. For those of you who are in plants, you don't know that Miles Laboratories was one of the leading pharmaceutical companies in the world. And it drove an industry here that people have soon forgotten about because of the dominance of what you guys have produced. So I am so proud to be from Elkhart and do what I do because I carry you with me. There are so many opportunities right here in Elkhart right now because you've driven and paved that way. I'm going to continue to cheerlead for you. I'm going to continue to, he said I was big in stature, but I'm not quite sure what that meant. But I do have some broad shoulders. And everywhere I go, I speak about what you do. And I want you to continue to do what you do. I want you to invest in your local community. There are many opportunities for you to get involved. And I will be there to welcome you. So when I speak about resilience, you understand what that means. And when the chips are down, when it's time to stand up behind it, I knew how many dealerships I had to call. And I was on the phone calling them because there was this big window in front of me and people were outside saying, "Did you call that last dealer?" So let's make sure that we continue to stand up in the face of whatever adversity we face and do what we do so well, because that's what Elkhart is. I called it Elkhart built, Elkhart strong, and that's what you are. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being a part of Elkhart, and let's continue to do what we do.
He wasn't sure what big in stature meant. Did you see us standing next to each other? Come on. In my day, he would have been a power forward. In his day, he was a power forward, or he's a big guard. I'm not sure which. A two guard? You've never been a two guard in your life. Anyway, thanks, Rod. We do have a surprise guest that we weren't sure was going to be with us today, and we're privileged to give her the microphone for a couple minutes. Joining us this morning is Indiana's Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch, whom I have had the pleasure of meeting with in a private session. She hails from Evansville, Indiana. She's a Purdue graduate. Go Boilers. Right, Bob? Go Boilers, right? She served in the Indiana legislature from 2005 till being named Indiana's state auditor in 2014 and was named Indiana's lieutenant governor in 2017. and she has announced her intention to run for governor in the 2024 election cycle. A warm welcome, please, for Indiana's Lieutenant Governor, Suzanne Crouch.
Well, good morning. It's wonderful to be with you all today, and this is my first breakfast, RV breakfast, so it's a joy to be with you, and it's an honor to serve as the 52nd Lieutenant Governor of Indiana. Now, what you might not know about me is on April Fool's Day, my husband and I celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary, and when we got married 45 years ago, I kept my maiden name, which was really unusual at the time. So I'm Suzanne Crouch. Now my husband is Larry Downs. And I thought about hyphenating my name, but Suzanne Crouch Downs? My husband and I talked about how our roles have changed over the years. Because my husband's retired, he lives at our home in Evansville, Indiana, and he does everything. He takes care of the house, he does the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, the shopping. I'm in Indianapolis working during the week, and then I come home on the weekends. And I told him, I said, you know, honey, after 45 years of marriage, it's wonderful to finally have a wife at home. Well, he has a very dry sense of humor. I said that, he looked at me and said, I know I never had one. But it's such a joy to be with you all. And you all are big players in Indiana's economy. You contribute over $34 billion to our state's economy. In fact, 10% of Indiana's economy comes from the RV and the manufactured home industry. You all are giants in Indiana's economy. And we've worked hard to create an environment where you can thrive and Indiana can be successful. And much of that is due to the legislators who serve you in the Indiana General Assembly. If you're a legislator, would you please stand up so we can thank you for making Indiana the kind of state where the RV industry can lead the world. Please stand up and let us thank you. Anyway, thank you for doing what you do for Indiana, for being a leader, for helping Indiana to innovate and to trailblaze for the rest of the country. So God bless you, thank you, and keep on keeping on. Take care.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for taking the time to be with us this morning. We certainly appreciate it and enjoy you being here. This morning's industry panel will be moderated by Bob Parrish, Vice President, Global Accounts for Wells Fargo DF, and Sherm Goldenberg, former publisher and currently senior editor of RV Business Magazine. Bob and Sherm, would you please come forward? It's my pleasure to introduce to you the members of the industry panel. First, from RVIA, the Forest River General Manager and current RVIA Chairman, Kevin McArt. From RVDA, owner and manager of the Walnut Ridge Family RV Sales and RVDA Chairman, Nathan Hart. From RVIA, the association's Executive Vice President, James Ashurst. And from RVDA, the association president, Phil Ingrassia. Bob and Sherm, it's all yours.
Technical diff, there we go.
Thank you. This is not our first rodeo. Parrish and I. Um, uh, eh, we appreciate this opportunity. We know these four gentlemen from the years here, and let me start by asking, and I'm going to start reading here a little bit about your respective associations and how things have been going lately, given the crazy post-pandemic year we're all experiencing. I mean, how are you guys, both associations, weathering the storm?
I guess I'll start off. I promised that I would thank the Emerging Leaders Group and the hundreds of volunteers that are in the room that came out yesterday to Oxbow Park. It was a great day. Got everything done we wanted to do. So first off, a round of applause to everybody that came out. It's an awesome initiative, and we really appreciate it. So I would say the Emerging Leaders Group is one of the ways that we've been working together. I thought back to what Craig likes to talk about, and he likes to talk about industry unity. And I think back to COVID and that period of time where we really weren't sure what the industry was going to do in response to that. And we quickly pulled together a task force of dealers, OEMs, suppliers, campgrounds. We had weekly meetings. We talked about where the challenges were. We talked about how we could safely work together, how our employees stay safe, how we could remain open and continue to serve our customers. And I think about that, and I think that's just a great testament to how well we've worked together. Obviously, Go RVing for the past 25 plus years is the way the two associations have worked. But in my short time in RV years, being at RVIA, I don't know that the relationship's ever been better or ever been closer. I want to build on that.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen over the last several years, coming out of COVID, but even before that, are the lines of communication have never been more open between our two boards. Our executive committees and officers meet on a regular basis to talk about the issues. And, in the past, the industry had a tendency to kind of try to spin everything to make it seem like everything was, sweetness and light. We all know that there are challenges, and the leaders we have on this stage and the leaders that preceded us have really broken down some of the barriers to communication that existed in the past. And I think it's just been a better relationship, a stronger relationship to make a better industry.
Yes, I totally agree. I haven't been on the board or part of this as long as these two have. And I've been told in the past it was a little bit different relationship than it is today. And it's a joy to work with them, with both boards. And it's really a testament to the leadership, the executive leadership of both these associations. RVIA with Craig and James, and RVDA with Phil. They had the vision to say, hey, look, let's work together. Let's make sure that we're doing what's right for OEMs, dealers, and of course the consumer. And if we make decisions that are good for all three, then our industry is going to go in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, to echo everyone or your points here, where do you find an industry where you have manufacturers, suppliers, aftermarket, lenders, and campgrounds all working together for a common goal? It's right here. We got 1,000 people here today at this power breakfast. And that's pretty remarkable and a testament to our industry unity.
Absolutely. We have a lot more in common than we do in terms of differences. So we've always shown over the years that we always do our best when we're working together.
Speaking of which, working together,
Sure.
Go RVing, a co-owned organization, a marketing program that is owned by the Dealers Association and RVIA. Could you give us a quick update on Go RVing and how it's going? A very unusual program nationally.
Yeah, I think the program continues to evolve. Obviously, the way people market, the impact of digital nowadays has really changed what was the traditional forms of marketing that you used to see in years past. So the team has really stayed on top of these changes, really gotten very good at focusing on those high-value audiences. We've brought in, and we can talk a little bit later, just over the course of the last 3 years, we've brought in a much younger, much more diverse audience. So, when I talk about optimism for the industry, I think back to the 40 years of growth that we've seen, since 1980 when we shipped 106,000 units to where we find ourselves today. That's a track record of success. And for more than 25 years of that, Go RVing has been part of that, and it's been a great partnership between the dealers and the OEMs. They're great about getting us products at Go RVing, coming out and supporting the events that we do. So again, I think when we talk about industry unity, we talk about industry partnerships, I think Go RVing is really foundational in that element.
Right, Go RVing remains focused on those, buyers that are at the top of the buying funnel. The people that are interested in RV travel really don't know what it's about, but it's a safe place for them to come, learn about all the products that everyone works so hard to manufacture and sell, and it's just a great unity for everybody to work together to keep those incoming buyers in a safe spot so that they can learn all about all the great products that we sell.
And a lot of our dealers and a lot of our members that are in the audience, have really matured in their own marketing efforts and their own advertising. So we want to continue to try to find ways where we can take research and use that to help our member companies, our dealer partners, inform their decision-making in the marketing space, and so that all of our efforts are complementing one another and we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. So I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that from Go RVing moving forward.
So let's talk about upcoming events. June is a big month for both associations, but for RVIA it culminates in the RVs Move America Week, which then ends up hitting Capitol Hill in the Advocacy Day. Can you give us some insight on what some of those topics might be on the Hill?
Sure. I want to start by first saying that the registrations for this year's RVs Move America Week has surpassed last year's. So that's pretty incredible, and again, a testament to our industry unity. One of the hot topics that we're going to be advocating for is the dealer floor plan interest reduction on towables. While dealer inventory or interest expenses on motorhomes remain fully deductible, towables are now limited to 30% interest expense based on earnings. This is problematic because 85% of the RVs that are in the market today are non-motorized towables. And this topic is more important than ever right now because of the high interest rates and the slowdown in the economy. So we're going to be asking legislators to support the Travel Trailer and Camper Tax Parity Act. Another topic that we're going to be asking for is the renewal of the GSP program. And we're looking for a 6-year or longer term for that renewal. And GSP, for those that are just first hearing of this, it's the Generalized System of Preferences. And it's a long-running U.S. trade preference program. And under this program, our industry is able to import Lawan, which is a necessity in building RVs, duty-free. And this program expired at the end of 2020, and we're going to be advocating for its renewal this coming June. And so, James, I'll turn it over to you to fill in some of the other hot topics we got.
I'll first mention that our GA team is actually sitting over here, and they'll be around if you want to expand upon any of this, because neither Kevin or I are lobbyists. But obviously a big win for us a few years ago was the Great American Outdoors Act. There is a piece of sister legislation, I'm going to try to get this right, the American Outdoor Recreation Act, which sort of puts into play the funding and the tools for states to roll out pilot programs to help with the campground modernization. Obviously, we've got great partnerships with KOA and others in the private campground sector, but public lands, national parks, they are absolutely critical for us to continue to grow as an industry, because people have to have places to go, and there's not been any investment in decades in our national parks or federal land. So that's a really big thing, and our GA team is going to be working with our association partners who are coming into town to really beat that drum. There's a piece of legislation that's been reintroduced in the Senate, and so we're going to be really pushing to get that to move forward and get the House to also take up some work on that and get that moving. So I would say those were the big pushes from our federal policy. But again, if you've got any questions, we've got several members from our GA team here today, and they can talk to it much better than I can.
Following up, Phil, Congress Expo has just been growing leaps and bounds. Can you give us, it's again, what, November in Vegas?
Right, we're November 6th to the 10th at Paris, Las Vegas. And, you know, the convention expo has really grown over the last several years, thanks to a lot of the folks in this room who support that event. And we really do appreciate it. And it's really an opportunity for dealers to learn from dealers and also learn from their vendors, because we really do need to have an event like this where, you know, certainly open house is incredibly important, but there's a lot of other things that go into running a dealership. You know, the financing, the marketing, the computer systems that run the dealerships. So it's a great opportunity to highlight those companies as well at a time where, you know, the business has slowed down a little bit, so it's a good opportunity in November to get everybody together.
Yes, and you know, attendance was up 16% last year. There was energy there. There was excitement for those of you that attended. And it's not just for dealers. I mean, I had some manufacturing reps that were there last year and said they got a lot out of it. And if anybody in the room knows a dealer that maybe doesn't run as profitable or as efficient as they should, encourage them to go. I mean, they're going to come back better prepared, and they're going to make our industry better. This is where you meet the vendors. This is where you meet the DMS providers. This is where you come in contact with the training companies. So it's imperative that we get people to this event, because there's no other event like it in our industry. And it's been a fun for us to be a part of it. I sent a huge crew out there last year, and they all came back energized, and really helps our dealership performance, which in the end game helps with our customer experience and makes their time with us better.
I don't think I'm cutting anybody off here. I was going to transition to a question about the market, the 20-ton gorilla in the room, the market itself, and where things are headed. Well, let me, you know, what do you think of the state of the industry, the RV arena as we know it, as it relates to the U.S. economy, of course, but give us you can even get a little political if you want, but having said that, you know, what are your thoughts on analysis of what we're seeing out there right now?
I'll talk from a dealer standpoint. I mean, yes, it's difficult. There's some challenges. You know, we're still selling and things are going well. You know, our stores are going. You know, we're doing what we need to do. It's not the way it was. That, you know, we can still focus on the things we need to focus on to make our dealerships better, so when things bounce back, we'll be prepared to take care of our customers. Until consumers feel better about the future, I think we're going to continue to struggle. And I don't know when that's going to change. Maybe Peter will tell us a little bit about that later. But, you know, I mean, when you hear the news every day that says we're going to have a recession or things are going to be tough, then people don't really want to spend money. They want to hold on to it. A lot of our consumers, their financial picture hasn't really changed that much. And, you know, we can see that through the KOA numbers and the camping numbers. People are traveling, but maybe they don't want to commit to buying a larger ticket item until they feel more comfortable.
Well, from my perspective, we need economic stability, all right? Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 10 times since March of last year. It's affecting the consumer confidence level, and it's also raising everyone's monthly payments. So with inflationary price dealer inventory out there, coupled with high interest rates, it's making it more of a challenge for these consumers to hit their monthly budgets on purchases. So, I mean, in talking to some dealers, you know, customers with good to great credit, I mean, their interest rate is north of 8%. You know, some customers understand it, that this will be the new normal. Others, to your point, Nathan, are holding off that purchase. So we just need some economic stability. And I think, you know, our industry will be much better off once that happens.
And I guess if we want to have a little bit of optimism, I'll try to inject a little optimism into the room. You know, I talked earlier about that growth that we've seen, you know, over the past 40 plus years. You know, it's read like an EKG. We've had downturns during that period of time. A lot of times those downturns were things that were out of our control. But as an industry, we've persevered over a considerable period of time and have seen incredible growth. Just during the period of COVID, we did research every year of new buyers, of first-time buyers, to evaluate what the reasons were for why people were purchasing. And it was fascinating what we found, because the median age of an average RV owner was 54 years of age. In 2020, the average age of a first-time RV buyer dropped to 41. In 2021 and 2022, that number dropped down to 33 for a first-time RV buyer. So we're 20 years lower than what that median age was of an RV owner. So I guess I'll kind of channel my inner Bill Belichick and ask, how are we going to succeed? Do your job, okay? Build a good product, create a great dealer experience, have great aftermarket products, have great campgrounds, okay? If we all do those things and we all do our jobs, there's no reason why we can't have decades more of success moving forward. Are there going to be hiccups along the way? Sure, there have been for 40 years. But the data shows us that the consumer is interested in RVing. The consumer is still camping. Again, going back to what you said before, having some of that stability, maybe not having so much bad news all the time. Again, the people that came in 2022 to purchase first-time RVs, 7 out of 10 have indicated that they plan to buy another RV. Those are very, very positive numbers. So I don't want that to get lost in this room when we're looking at drops from what were historic shipment and retail numbers.
Right, we're looking at a higher installed base. We just have to make sure that we're taking care of that customer. And again, when we're working together on the repair event cycle time initiative, which is to get people through the service drive much more quickly, is another example where the industry continues to invest in that, whether it's through RVTI right here in Elkhart, or the things that the RV Learning Center that RVDA controls is working on fixed operations training. Aftermarket is a huge opportunity right now for us to grow revenue across the board in the industry, both from the dealer side and from the other industry partners.
Yes, and we can utilize this slower time to, I don't want to say build back better, because we know that didn't work out very well. But, you know, make sure we're creating a better experience for our customer. And you mentioned RVTI, the fixed operations training through the Learning Center. I mean, you know, at our dealerships, we have been training our technicians. And I know I'm going to stumble over some of your questions here later, but, you know, we don't have enough technicians. Millions of RVs have been built over the last couple of years, and we need more RVs. We need more RV technicians. They're not just going to show up at your door, so we've got to create those. We have that through the RVTA and the team that Kurt Himmler has out there. They're doing great. We just wrote an article about it. It was featured in RV Executive today. And if we train our people when we hire them, the retention rate's higher. And if we can do continuing education through the other levels of certification that they offer, then our efficiencies go up. If our efficiencies go up, our customers are getting through the, they're getting through the shop quicker. And if that happens, then our RECT numbers go down. So that's what we got to continue to focus on. How do we make the experience better, like James and Phil were saying?
Related to that,
BJ's frantically waving over there.
Yeah.
what's he telling us about the clock? Okay.
Yeah, like it's
Okay.
over. But
All right, no, we can be speedy here. You mentioned in that article in RV Executive today that we could use double the amount of service technicians nationally. Is that pretty much?
Well, you know, we have 11,000 technicians that are currently at some stage of training in RVTI. There's 786 dealerships that have at least one technician in training. But there's how many RV dealers? 2,600, 2,700? Why isn't that number 1,500? We need to be encouraging dealerships to have training programs, to develop their own technicians so we can satisfy this need.
So did you see BJ over there? Is he doing okay?
BJ, we have time, Greg? One more time, one more question? All right, so you guys can't slip off the stage without talking about model year and you know, the changeover process. It's partly driven by a large number of 2022 models out there in inventory. And some are asking, is there a better way? Or is this just an aberration due to a viral environment?
That's an excellent question for Kevin McArt.
Thanks, James.
You're welcome, Chair.
Okay, so back in 2020, the RV Industry Association Board of Directors approved the voluntary recommended best practice for RV model year change. And what that entailed was for manufacturers making that annual model year change to coincide with the significant product design changes between the time periods of July 1st and August 31st. What this best practice did, it eliminated the half model year product that was out there in the field. It eliminated confusion amongst the consumers and the dealers and the lenders. So from my perspective, I feel that the recommendation is appropriate and in the best interest of our industry. I know that earlier this year we had a task force of OEMs and suppliers meet and reconfirm this year's 2024 best practice recommendation. And this task force will meet again prior to the open house or just slightly after to talk about next year's 2025 model year change. But as it stands right now, I don't think there needs to be any changes. I think it's what we're going through is, a little bit of a hiccup, a little bump in the road. I mean, like we either got the gas or our foot on the gas pedal or we got it on the brake. And every once in a while we hit a speed bump, and this is just one of them.
And RVDA, we reconfirmed our position paper that was created in 1987 to align with RVIA's. So the dealers support, we'll never get a consensus on what the date should be, but there is consensus that it needs to be something that we can depend on every year, consistent.
Gentlemen, thank you
Thank you.
very much.
you,
We
everybody.
appreciate the heck out of it, seriously.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Bob and Sherm as well for the moderation. We appreciate the updates on the industry. We're certainly very fortunate that we've attracted high-profile presenters for 2023, and we're especially pleased with what's up next. Bob Montgomery from CBS affiliate WSBT 22 in South Bend is a household name in northern Indiana based on his years of experience and leadership in the Michiana news arena. Bob moved from radio to WSBT TV full-time in 2014 and remains as the morning news anchor. This morning, Bob will host a fireside chat with Indiana's governor. Please welcome Bob Montgomery.
So thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come out. Since I'm on the media, I'll probably sit on the left because that seems to be the way that it's supposed to go these days. But on a more serious note, I'm honored to get the opportunity to come out and talk with the governor about some of the issues that are important to the industry and, of course, important to all of our pocketbooks. And I appreciate this chance today. So I have an IFB in this year when I'm talking a little bit too long from a producer is telling me to wrap, and I don't have that IFB or the producer telling me to wrap today. So what I'm told is if I see a red dot on my chest, that means I'm going a little too long. So I would pay attention to that. That would have my full attention. Let's make it short and sweet. So I will not get the wrap sign today. The governor of the state of Indiana, Governor Eric Holcomb. Good to see you. All right, Governor, thank you. We appreciate it.
I made.
You did make it.
Yeah, if that red dot comes out.
Yeah, you might want to get outside the range.
Yep.
let's get right to it. The state of Indiana has been listed by Forbes magazine as the #1 place to start up a business this year. Why is that?
Well, on that particular ranking, they take into consideration about 18 different criteria. Mostly, if you look at a number of them, they revolve around cost. Cost of doing business, cost of living, access to capital, funding, what do you want to start a business, what's your employment rate, similar to a momentum index, but we obviously score and have on multiple fronts at the top of the list when it comes to our tax and our regulatory environment. And so you start there, but increasingly this, our different economic engines around the state of Indiana here, obviously the epicenter of RV production and distribution, venture capital is increasingly becoming very important to growing the local economies. And so Forbes recognized that, and we share that fact all over the world.
Another thing that hits a lot of pocketbooks, of course, is the state income tax. The economist Stephen Moore last year, in fact, at this event, said states that have had the biggest economic boom still, ironically, have a state income tax. Sound like a good idea to Governor Eric Holcomb? and if it is, is it feasible, sustainable, and how do you pull something like that off?
Wish I would have been on stage with Stephen Moore. Yes, it's possible. Obviously, people have done it. You need to take into consideration multiple factors when you look at the states that have gone that way. I think what the Indiana State Senate has done is the right step, by the way, just here recently during this past session, and created a task force to really dig deep on this, to see that if you replace or remove $8 billion to the state coffers, or $3 billion to local coffers coming off of this one source, how do you replace it if you do? And you'll need to if you want to continue to serve our constituents and the citizens of Indiana and continue to make this a very attractive place to invest. So we've, over the years, over the decades, this is long before our administration, we've been cutting taxes along the way and paying down debt. We've always been a low debt state, but we continue to chip away at those debt levels. And so, understanding that it used to be, I remember when, our corporate tax rate was 8.5. It's 4.9 now. Our personal income tax is going down to 2.9 in year 2027. And so, as those go down, again, you have to have an honest conversation about what would you replace it with. Understanding that some of these states, we're not sitting on huge oil and gas reserves, right? Or we don't have the coastal ports of entry that a New York or an LA, or we don't have the coastline that a Florida or a Texas or a St. Simon or Sarasota, or you fill in the blank when you consider weather. So when you look at these things regionally and you look at tax structures in the portfolio, we just jump off the map as an attractive place to invest. And so you don't want to jeopardize that as you look to increase it somewhere else. It was last year we were on an economic development trade mission, and the momentum index came out. And they score primarily on three fronts: CapEx, capital investment growth, population growth, and employment growth. And Indiana was the only state in the Midwest that was north of the average on all three of those fronts. The only state in the Midwest. In fact, there were only 3 states outside the South and the West that were above the national average on all three. And it was New Jersey, which just shows you the exodus coming out of New York of people are actually moving to New Jersey.
On purpose?
It's on purpose, yeah. And usually then they go further and they end up in Sarasota or South Carolina. Or Georgia, or Tennessee. But it was New Jersey, Indiana, and South Dakota. The only 3 states north of the average. And so that shows you the kind of growth that is occurring here in the Great Lakes region, in the Midwest. And for South Dakota, and Christy None's doing a great job out there, but their population is,
Small.
Yeah, small. South Dakota's like South Bend, Mishawaka, and Elkhart. I bet you if you add all 3 of those population centers up. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
And so, great that they're doing that. But that just shows you have to look at the total picture in order to, as the panel just underscored, in order to year after year after year present stability and predictability and certainty and continuity. Those are the things that attracts investment to the state of Indiana. Just want to boil it down to a few key fronts.
The panel discussion we just heard talked a little bit about the national economy. Obviously, you deal with the state economy. The one person we didn't hear from on that panel discussion was you, and I wanted to get your take on this. Obviously, if things remain stable, the state will continue with the status quo and continue to push forward with the policies that we currently have to try to bring additional growth to the state.
We're not going to slow down.
Yes, exactly. My question, however, is your job is to think about the what if. So what if things turn a little further south? Is the state in a position right now to handle a bit more of a downturn than we're currently seeing, or maybe as bad as some of the projections could hit?
The answer is yes. We're in a position of strength, quite frankly. That doesn't mean, and by the way, we've proven it. If you rewind the tape and you go back to 08 or 09 or you go back a couple years, the state of Indiana not only has a strong balance sheet, both sides of the ledger, but we're also willing to do the courageous thing, and that's tighten the belt in tough times. And we constantly, as you just heard the panel, we constantly go back and look for efficiencies while the storm is occurring, right? And you often learn a lot when you're forced to. And so that's the whole point about, and the culture in Indiana state government, it's constantly, if you think about just my two predecessors, it was, aim higher, and then it was good to great. We constantly talk about taking it to the next level. That's the mentality is, if we're ranked number one, we want to be number one next year too. And we want to create more separation between us and the competition. And so therefore, you have to go through agency by agency, department by department, as a state, and figure out how we improve and how that's tethered to the customer's experience.
Let me ask you something that's specific to this room
The
and this
taxpayer
industry.
or the citizen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Specific to this industry, obviously we're seeing some larger RVs roll around. People want their internet access. Of course, kids demand it when they're on vacation, even when parents do their best to keep the phone and the tablets out of their hand. When they show up at the RV campgrounds, are the campgrounds able to accommodate some of the larger RVs? And what about that issue of internet service? Because oftentimes the campgrounds are in a place that aren't in the middle of a city.
Yeah, we're experiencing those same numbers in our state parks. We heard a lot about the federal parks and national parks just a few moments ago, but we're having record occupancy, record turnout on all of our campsites. I know the director, Dan Bortner, is running around here. I saw him from afar, and he's constantly depositing stats in my brain. We've got about 8,100, I think, by now, campgrounds, campsites, and about 81% of those have electrical hookup. About 44% of those have the 50 amp ability or the electrical service, and so we're on the right track. We're continuing to upgrade on these campsites, and as this industry gets bigger and more powerful, so will our recreational portfolio. That's why we're making investments in broadband internet. That's why we'll roll out another round. Very thankful to the legislature as well for another round of broadband internet funding. We're upgrading a little over 100, about 114 campgrounds right now because of this. And so, as has been in the past, we'll continue to work with this industry that's so critically important and to our economy and growing. That's why we're building a new state park lodge in Potato Creek up near here. The first new state park lodge since 1939.
I think we're due.
Yeah, we're due, yeah. And by the way, the market shows that this is, it can handle it, and more than handle it, it encourages it. And so we've got grand designs for the future on that as well. And understanding that there are some, I don't relate to this, but there are some parts of our campsites and campgrounds that are folks who want to be completely off the grid. and eat nuts and berries and drink water or boiler water, whatever they want to do. But, so there's a little set aside in that percentage that I was just rattling off there for those folks to run around and chant.
Okay, yes, the nuts and the berry group. Okay, understand that. INDOT is in the process of investing about $100 million over the course of a while with an electric charging station. You mentioned electricity access in the campgrounds itself. Obviously, it's no secret that the electric vehicle movement is on throughout the country. Some states mandating such, over the course of the next 5-10 years or so. What about electric charging stations? We could talk about that at another time, but what about electric charging stations for motorhomes and those electric vehicles that are towed behind those motorhomes? Is the state in a position or about to be in a position where we can utilize that so Indiana isn't a place that you have to avoid if you have an EV while you're traveling?
Sure. Well, we'll continue to control the things that we can't control, as you heard earlier, and seek to influence the things that we can't. And one thing is the evolution or the transition into hybrid or electric, et cetera. Understanding there's another force at play here too. It's not just recreational, but it's actually a blend of recreational and work. You can now work while you're in the RV in a national or a state park, which is a thing of beauty in my estimation. And so we want to encourage that as well, which is why we're investing in these campsites. We see it as a both, not an either or, not a you're detaching from your responsibilities, but you can do both. And understanding that we're the crossroads of America, we're going to hopefully get you as you're seeing the country at one point or another. And yes, this will require us, that $100 million that you referenced is federal dollars. And so we've put together the package, the map, if you will, of making sure that we're in rural, suburban, urban areas, so you're not by design or at the very outset eliminating parts of the market. And those, we're right at the stage right now where we're starting to roll out the bids, or will this year roll out the bids for the owners and the operators of those stations, and then construction will begin in earnest next year. So this is, for a state like Indiana, who has from the very outset been the innovators in terms of the future of mobility. I mean, we're here at a record turnout. We'll have a record turnout at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on May 28th. If you're not from Indiana, if you've not been to the Indy 500, it's a bucket list item. I would suggest you go with a governor. It's a different experience. You will see things that you cannot unsee.
Spend much time in the infield, do you?
But that track was built originally over 100 years ago as a test track for engines, right? And so when you think about the future of mobility and where we're going, we've been doing this, going through a time of transition from the very, very outset of the horse and buggy.
The state just wrapped up its legislative session. Congratulations on that, I suppose. The best news is it's over. The secondary news, I'm
Quiet
sure
now.
I'm sure it's much quieter these days.
Yeah.
What makes you smile when you look back and you think about this session?
It's a long list, and first and foremost, grateful just for the cooperation, just for the focus on the things that really matter. We don't just think big, we act big, and we just proved it. I would say this is the best budget I've ever seen. Had someone who's been a mentor to me say it's been the best budget in the last 100 years. And I think it's because it gets at a lot of issues that we've talked about for a number of years. But because we're in this place where we can cut taxes, pay down debt, invest historically in an unprecedented manner in K through 12, or options for in our K through 12 space, investing in law enforcement salary increases long overdue, making sure parents weren't double billed for their textbooks or curriculum material with fees.
Thanks for that, by the way, as a parent.
I mean,
Appreciate that.
I hear from people all over the state that say that just saved me $450 or $900. That's a
Per
tax
kid.
cut, by the way. Yeah. And so there's just another round of ready, $500 million. You talk about an uber successful program that's reinvesting in communities from the ground up. And I think about just the momentum that we're able to build on right now and really accelerate away from just last week, let alone the last year or the last 2 years. To put this in perspective for Indiana, to give some good news, and I don't say this egocentrically, this is about momentum. This is about where we were and where we are right now. If you look at before our administration came into office, the 12 years prior, when I first walked into the State House and was helping one of my predecessors, you look at what came in terms of capital investment in through the IEDC, did about, in that 12-year period, about $49 billion. In the next 6 years, we've done $60 billion. 6 years, half the time, $10 billion more. Our record year was $8.7 billion a couple years ago. Last year, we did $22.2 billion. This year, the pipeline is fuller than last. We're now chasing deals that are bigger than single years. And so now we got to land all these birds, but we got a really good track record, and I'd rather be in the heart of the heartland in Indiana than anywhere else.
Yeah, like
in the
that big
country.
GM potential battery plant up near New Carlisle, that could be significant.
I look forward to seeing you all soon.
About $3 billion, about $3 billion. Were you breaking some news this morning, are you, on that front?
No.
Okay. Had to ask, it's part of my job. So you are,
Get that, can I put that red?
before I get the red dot, I think I am going to wrap with this last question. You are in the process of coming up to the final year of your final term.
That's so I'm told.
The next
Daily.
governor will be the next governor will be stepping into your shoes at some time soon. What advice would you give that person, and what advice would you give to that person when it comes to this industry, the RV industry?
Don't miss this breakfast. Let's start there. You could take that from a general perspective or from a very focused or laser perspective. In general, it would be to surround yourself with a good team, and the way you do that is by having an agenda that people can not only rally around, but understand they're part of something bigger than themselves or that particular year. Attract the best. Turn the cards face up. Let people know what your agenda is, what your goals are, what the mission is, how you're going to realize that mission. Be informed. Let the data drive your decisions, as hard as they may be. Have some courage to do the right thing, understanding that typically in life it works out at the end if you do that. It may feel bumpy along the way, but if you don't take your eye off the ball, good things are in store. I would, when I say be informed, it would be not just about events internally or externally, but it would be keep your eye on what's driving the costs, what's made this state such a great place to invest, and then seek to crush the records that we've set. That's why Indiana continues to improve. It's not that, my predecessors are proud of the job that we're doing, and they tell me that, and I always remind them of this record, of that record, of this record, but that's the way we have to be. We have to say, okay, we did $22 billion in 1 year. Let's get to 36. Let's get to 48. This is a place in the country that has become a model in terms of that certainty and predictability and stability, continuity, et cetera. And so I would say keep your eye on the ball, understand what those costs are, the cost drivers. Look at the Medicaid, the growth of Medicaid versus the growth of revenue, and understand that that's why, that's the pressure, that's what's at stake, is those are going to collide. And that's why you have to grow the pie. That's why you have to grow opportunity. That's why you have to make sure, in terms of workforce development programs, et cetera, it all matters. Think about what a difference a decade makes. The difference between the 2010s and the 2020s, when we were at a very low inflation, very high unemployment. Now it's the opposite. Now it's a very high inflation and very low unemployment. And so where we're focused is how do we make sure we're skilling up the workforce, because that's driving, not being able to meet demand is driving prices up. That's driving inflation as well. And so how do we, when we do the math, understanding what our population is, 6.8 million, X in the 3.4 million in the labor participation in the workforce, private sector, all-time high, how do we get more people in the top of the funnel into positions that are producing, that are manufacturing. And that's how you grow opportunity for people, and keeping your eye on where's the puck going. That's why we're constantly talking about what is the future economy, what is the future of mobility, or you fill in the blank. And that's what, I gave you a lot more than you asked for. But, I mean, this is a long conversation, but it all matters. And people are watching, and that's a good thing if you're in our catbird seat.
That's a good thing. Governor, State of Indiana, Governor Eric Holcomb.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Know that dot.
Many thanks to the governor and for Bob hosting that session this morning. So we're going to take a 10 or 15-minute break. Feel free to mill around, do what you have to do, and I will call you back to order soon. Could I have your attention, please? Can we start finding our seats for the start of the second half, please? Could everybody start heading back towards their seats, please? You know, I don't even know what I did. I just need to let somebody else do it. Yeah. Please find your seats. Ready to start? I was told to yell. Find your seats, please. Hi, Tina. I lost it. All right, we're doing good. Keep moving. All right, before we start with our next presenter, a couple of notes, please. First, don't forget that 10 or 15 minutes after the close of the breakfast, we will have more with Morici. Peter will be up here to answer questions and intermix with any of you that are interested, so please plan to stay. Secondly, and I will remind you again, when you leave here today, please use patience and common sense. There are 1,000 people, and no matter how hard you try, not everyone can be the first one out the door or out of the parking lot. So please be kind to those around you. Always one of the highlights of the Power Breakfast is hearing from our friends at KOA. Not only do they display leadership in the campground industry, but they lead as well with consumer studies and surveys that, if we listen, help the entire industry. Joining us this morning from Montana is the president and CEO of Campgrounds of America, Toby O'Rourke. She's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. She's been at KOA since 2011 and proven to be an outstanding leader, not only for her company, but for the entire outdoor industry. Additionally, Toby serves on the board of directors of RVIA. Please welcome KOA President and CEO, Toby O'Rourke.
Morning. Morning. 25.7 million. That's the number of how many new households have started camping since 2020. 25.7 million. Our annual research study came out a couple weeks ago, which you may have seen, that says, rest assured, camping is very healthy. Despite what's happening in the economy right now, fluctuating gas prices, inflation, and normal travel patterns resuming, people are still camping. And it's growing. 6 million new households started camping just last year alone. Prior to the pandemic, we used to see about 2 to 3 million new households per year, and last year we saw 6. Very healthy. It is definitely the hottest thing in travel, in my opinion. 1 out of every 3 leisure trips last year included camping. And as we all know, camping is an important economic engine. We have all this great data about our contribution to the GDP, but beyond that, we estimate that campers spent $52 billion in local communities last year while they were camping. And that's $8 billion more than the year before. All of this buzz has created widespread awareness for camping. And a good way that we can think about that is through this funnel. Traditional purchase funnel, if you're aware of one. So we're going to talk about that awareness at the top. That's generated from everything we've been talking about. The great advertising from Go RVing, reaching tens of millions of people. The advertising from all the brands here in this room. Also, national press, right? Kind of media darlings, especially now as we're headed into Memorial Day, we're getting a lot of great press coverage. And now other brands, other companies outside of our category are on the bandwagon. Subaru right now is selling their product through ads about camping, if you've caught those. Lot of awareness. So then out of that big bucket, there's a group of people who will move into interest, into consideration. They're aware of camping. Their neighbor has an RV. They've seen it on TV. But now they have a need to go camping, and they're going to consider it. Maybe they want to take their kids on a unique vacation. Maybe their expenses are tight, and they view this as an affordable activity. They don't want to get on an airplane. I'm in that bucket. They don't have time. Maybe they don't want to take their vacation time to go across the country, but they know they can have a great vacation close to home in an RV. So they're aware, they have interest, and then they make that decision to camp. And like I started out, since 2020, 25.7 million people, households, have made that decision to camp. And that's the group I want to talk about this morning. Once they make a decision, they move into that journey. They decide where they're going to camp, they book their trip, they go on their stay, and then we hope that they come back in. And the big question that we all have, everyone in this room, we all share the question is, are these people going to camp again? Are they going to buy another RV? Are those who rented an RV going to buy an RV? Are we going to keep them in the camping journey? Well, the answer isn't very simple, and it's not very positive, to be honest. 68% of those new campers are lukewarm or unlikely to camp again. 68%. For the past couple of years, when I've been asked about all these new people camping when I do interviews, I always say, There's going to be natural drop-off. Camping's not going to be for everybody. But I really don't accept that anymore, and I don't think you should either. I want to know what's not okay for those people who don't want to camp again, so we can fix it. Honestly, I haven't really dug into this new camper group very much until recently, and there were some things jumping out at me that I thought we should talk about this morning. We asked people who went on an RV trip for the first time, how was your first RV trip? 32% said good or great. So what was less than okay for that other 64%? Here's the problem as I see it, the reality. Camping, RVing is the easy choice, but it's not always easy. Easy choice, not always easy. What do I mean by that? Easy choice. People have started camping and RVing for very compelling reasons these past couple of years. Started out because of safety. People wanted their own things. They didn't want to stay in hotels and get on airplanes during the pandemic. They wanted to be outdoors instead of indoors. And we know that a lot of people now are looking for flexibility since the pandemic. And 72% of campers think camping is more flexible than air travel and hotels. It's also affordable. 2/3 of people feel camping is more affordable than hotels and airlines, and it is. The average increase of a hotel room from right now to last year is 54%. Hotel rates are up 54%. Airlines are up 18%. At KOA, the average increase on our RV sites right now is 7.5%. 54%, 7.5%. It's a big difference there. In this economy, affordability is very important. We need to keep people in this cycle. And camping continues to show its resiliency. Of all travelers, not just campers, over half think that camping is a more affordable vacation. And of those people who already own RVs, 33% said they're going to use it more times this year in place of other types of travel, and as we head into a down economy. Now, you probably have an idea what might not be easy for your customer. Because while they all made this great choice to start camping, to start RVing, they made the easy choice, it's a natural choice, it's not always easy, especially if you're a new camper, a new RVer. It can be intimidating. It can be hard to figure out how to drive the RV, where to park it, where to find a campsite, even how to start a campfire, what to pack. That can be intimidating. It's not always easy. And I'm sure you look at what's not easy for your customer. Maybe you get very granular and look at that. But what I think is really great about this room, as was mentioned this morning, is this brings together our whole ecosystem. Suppliers, OEMs, campgrounds, dealers, aftermarket. So what I'd like us to think about is this camping journey in terms of our whole ecosystem. And we can look at this, the end-to-end experience of that camper on this journey through all of us. So that camper makes the decision to camp, and they have to decide how. This is how new campers have broke down. 44% in tents, 26% in cabins or glamping, 24% in RVs. Of those who RV, they rent, they borrow. Some of them start right off by owning. So as they enter this cycle, if they make that decision to buy right off the bat, they go through that purchase cycle. And then everyone proceeds over to discover where to go camping. There is a lot of places to camp. I represent a very small segment of the camping industry. We see most people camp state, national, provincial parks. That's why getting the passage of the American Recreation Bill is so important. We've seen the biggest increases over the past couple of years in people camping on public and private land other than a campground. They pick a place to camp, they book, they move into the experience. If you own an RV, you may have some service that needs to be attended to, and then everyone has maintenance and storage. And then we want people to go back into that cycle. And they might do it a different way next time. We see 80% want to try other ways to camp. We do see switching. 1 out of every 4 cabin camper and tent camper wants to try an RV, which is great. This is how our pipeline gets filled for RV purchases. And if we can keep people in this cycle, especially now in this economy, and keep them happy and keep them cycling through when they do have more discretionary income, they do feel comfortable, they will buy that RV. So we all share the customer in this life cycle. But just as we all share the customer, we can all lose the customer. And we can lose the customer at any point in this process, as shown by these little, what I'm calling exit ramps, where those little X's are. They could have a bad experience in one part of the journey, and then another part of the segment has lost that customer. They could have a bad experience on campgrounds, find it very difficult. You've lost a potential RV buyer. Maybe they have a terrible service experience, decide to sell their RV, and now I've lost a future repeat camper. We all share the customer, we all lose the customer. And it's important that we think about how we make it easier, right, across the board here, because otherwise this isn't a map of a campground journey, this is a map of exit ramps. So to recap, a lot of new people have made that decision to camp. They made the easy choice, the smart choice. We know it's not always easy. We all share this customer. We can all lose this customer. To achieve our shared goal of retaining that customer, we all have that goal of retaining that customer, we need to challenge ourselves and each other to find and fix points of friction. Find and fix points of friction. What do I mean by friction? Well, friction is that force that an object encounters when it comes into contact with another object, right? Slows it down. Similarly, in a customer sense, we talk about points of friction being things that slow down the customer experience, makes it more difficult for them. And that can lead to loss or churn of that customer. Another way of thinking about points of friction is pain points. What are the pain points for that customer? We need to identify those, smooth them over so we can keep people retained in this cycle. So we dug into this a little bit and asked, what are some of those pain points? What are those points of friction? Here's a few. Only 23% of new campers said the sales team was helpful to them when first buying their RV in learning how to use the RV. In the discover phase, a quarter of people don't know where to camp. Or they think there's not enough campgrounds for their style of camping. "27% have difficulty booking a campsite. While camping, 2/3 of people say packing, driving, setting up is a pain point for them. Crowded campgrounds, not feeling safe and secure. Service side, 33%, 35%. Quality of the RV, getting service on their RV is a friction point in their process. Again, everybody, these are first-time campers. Sizable number, say unpacking and cleaning when back home is a friction point. if we don't smooth over these friction points, we are at risk of losing those 70% of people that are lukewarm about continuing camping. We have to demand exceptional service at every point in the process. We have to make it easy to do business with us. Because what we also see in our research is if people have a great first experience, over half are likely to camp again. Over half, and I know we can increase that even more. Because if we can make the experience seamless and easy and less stressful, they can focus on spending time with their loved ones and enjoying the outdoors. That's the whole reason they went camping in the first place. And that emotional attachment to their loved ones, and that emotional attachment to camping is what's going to get them back camping again. And we see that. We talk to teenagers. They have such this great memories of, or these great feelings of camping with their family. And then as they become adults, they try to replicate that with their own family. But if it's not easy, they're likely to drop off. And the easier and less stressful we can make it, the more we can create lifelong campers. So from a solution, if I could offer some ideas, to find and fix those points of friction, we need to have a relentless focus on the customer, all of us. A buzzword for that is being customer obsessed. Customer obsession is hyper-focus on the customer experience from the customer perspective. It's a commitment to being customer-centric. 3 ways we can break it down very simply: know, improve, and measure. We have to know who that customer is, and we have to know what their pain points are. We need to use data, invest in research to really understand our customers. I have a lot of research, but we have to go deeper. And we have to get more granular on this new camper. Sometimes the best way to do it is through what we call ethnographies, where you talk to people when they're in the experience of using the product or engaging in the activity. I think we could find some really great learnings there. But for now, what I know about the camper from an age perspective is that 70% of new campers are Gen Z or millennial. They're under the age of 42. And as James said, the average age of a buyer last year was 33. So how does knowing the age of the new camper change how we fix and identify and fix these pain points in the process? Obviously, technology has to be incorporated. We have to be mobile first in our strategies. We have to think about how we personalize the experience. Another thing I like to do as a marketer in understanding a customer is build personas. So we can identify different groups of our customers. We can walk through that process and understand what their pain points might be, because they're going to be different, right, for different groups. So let's think about families quickly, because 46% of new campers are camping with kids. And did you know that 25% of families are camping because they're traveling for sporting events? So let's, walk through the process. How does the pain points need to be addressed to make things easier for the family camper? Or we can look at it from an accessibility standpoint. This is a new area of focus for us because we are learning that 4 in 10 campers say they have some difficulty walking or climbing stairs. That's a sizable number. How do we make RVs more accessible? How do we make campgrounds more accessible? We can also think about accessibility from a sensory standpoint. 27% have difficulty with social interactions and communications, impacted by crowds of people, loud noises, too much visual and audible stimulation. Lots of pain points in the process for this group that we could address, and it's a sizable amount of people. One unique area, some new technology that's coming out, is you can add plugins to your website, that your website can be customized based off the needs of that user. It's a good thing to think about in terms of this group. How about the remote worker? 33% of all people work remotely right now since the pandemic. When people are camping, 46% are working while they camp. So how do we think about RV product knowing people are going to be working when they're at their site? And what do we have to solve at the campground? It obviously underscores the need for good Wi-Fi. And we can't just check a box that we have it. We have to worry about the quality, because that is a key point of friction as well. Only 28% of campers say the Wi-Fi they've had at a campground is excellent. If I'm someone that works remotely, this would definitely be an exit ramp item for me. We need to operationalize what we know. I do a lot of research. I don't just do it for fun. I'm a big believer that we need to do research and then do something with it. We need to improve our products, improve our processes through what we learn in our research about the customer. All of these pain points are really ripe for innovation. They're also really ripe for disruption. There's a lot of new companies starting up in this industry trying to address these pain points. We're seeing a lot, for example, in the booking experience, trying to aggregate places for people to stay to make it easier for the camper to find somewhere to go. I would challenge you to think about how you can disrupt yourselves in the way that you do things. We're trying to do that. I added a position, an executive director of digital transformation is his title. I told him he was charged with disrupting how we do things, finding new technology solutions to make what we do better. We're a 60-year-old company. It's pretty easy to get stuck in your ways. We have to continue to disrupt our thinking. All of these pain points are also natural places for partnership. There's lots of ways within our ecosystem we can partner. We can activate, for example, mobile technicians on sites to campgrounds. I still think there's a lot to explore on the dealer and campground side. For example, can we be setting aside campsites on a campground for a new customer to come stay in, maybe even before they sign the papers and buy that RV, to make sure that RV is really going to meet their needs to solve that pain point early on. Also, have you heard the term co-opetition? There's a lot of competition in this business. I've got a lot of competition too, increasingly so. And this model I'm talking about today doesn't ignore that. What it does, though, is challenge us to look holistically at what the problems are. There's a lot of room for competitive advantage because how we solve the points of friction might differ between brands. But co-opetition is bringing competitors together to solve problems. I think one thing we could do as a group is tackle training of the new RVer. If you recall, 23% said they learned about how to use that RV when they were buying the product. Most of the respondents said they received help from the campground owner or staff, and about a third of people are online, looking at online forums and blogs. So we have a lot of unprepared new RVers out in the market trying to figure out how to use their RV. Not only does that make their process more difficult, creates more points of friction for them, makes them more likely to leave the process, it also contributes to problems with improper waste management and illegal boondocking. That creates a lot of stress on our public lands and the people that oversee those. So if we can create some innovative ways to train across our ecosystem, we can help ease their minds, make them enjoy the process more, and also create more ethical RVers. We need to measure. We need to ask for feedback, catalog that, make improvements based off what the feedback is. I'm a big believer you need to be proactive in that feedback, go online and see what's being said about you, and also then respond promptly to customer complaints. But we really move the dial when we measure customer satisfaction. I would suggest you consider the Net Promoter Score. We've been using Net Promoter Score, NPS, for 15 years at KOA. It asks every customer a simple question. We send it automatically after their stay. How likely are you to recommend the service or product to others? It's a score of 1 to 10. And then there's an algorithm. You take the number of people, the percent of people that gave you 9s and 10s, your promoters, you subtract the detractors, and you get a score. A score of 50 is great. You have more promoters than detractors. Score of 70 is considered world class. I like NPS because it's used everywhere, and it allows us to benchmark all parts of our business against maybe people we admire or other companies we want to be like, or just to learn from. For example, John Deere is a 54. Samsung, 67. Costco, 79 NPS. Tesla, 97. The highest you can get is 100. I did not list out here those that have negative NPS, but because I knew the press was here, I didn't want that going out. But there are some I think you'd find very interesting that have very low NPS. NPS is great. It's for benchmarking, building action plans, setting goals as you build your business objectives. But again, getting back to the theme of my speech, would our shared customer recommend camping to others? As we think about it from an ecosystem perspective, would that new camper recommend camping to others? Well, we asked that in our research. The experienced RVer, someone who's been doing this for a while, their NPS is 43. Pretty good. Little room for improvement, but pretty good. The new camper NPS is 10. So this is definitely a call to action that we've got work to do to improve the experience for that new camper. Being customer obsessed will help us keep people on this journey with us. We can retain that 25.7 million I just talked about, but also there's going to be millions more that start camping this year and next year. It'll help us retain them. What I think it could also be powerful, though, in this conversation is to think about this from an economic standpoint. Another thing you may do in your company is talk about lifetime value of a customer. LTV measures total revenue to be expected from a customer throughout their history with you, throughout your business relationship with that customer. So let's imagine what the LTV is across our whole ecosystem of a single camping household. There's a lot right there. The collective value of that customer is immense. We could just do quick back of napkin math. From our research shows campers will camp for 33 years on average, 11 nights per year. You could tell me how many RVs they're going to buy, what those different price points would be. We could apply an inflation factor. You can see that that number can add up pretty quickly. That's what's at risk of losing one of those households out of this ecosystem. So hopefully, we're now thinking about this. We know that camping's the easy choice, not always easy. We all share the customer. We can all lose the customer. And to do that, we need to challenge ourselves and each other to find and fix those points of friction. We need to commit to being customer obsessed, to not only achieve these goals of retaining these customers, creating repeat buyers, creating repeat campers, to drive up that LTV of that camper, but also, and the icing on the cake is, we will create rabid fans who are going to tell more people and fill up more people into that awareness funnel. A campground is a real-life social network. It is buzzing. They're talking about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what they like, what they don't like. They're online telling family and friends. And the better experience they have, the more positive those conversations are, and we're dropping more people into that awareness funnel that are getting interested in camping and making that decision to start their journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. You always provide us plenty of things to take into account and think about as we leave and go back and run our businesses, and all pertains to our common customer, the RV owner or camper. Thank you. As we close in on the end of today's breakfast, I want to say a big thank you to the Wells Fargo organization, as they have in the past and have done again this year, beyond their sponsorship. They have made it possible for us to bring back Peter Morici. With that, I'd like to ask Chad Lyon, Managing Director, Marine and RV, Wells Fargo DF, to the podium to make the introduction. Chad?
Good morning. So probably the easiest job anyone has on stage today is introducing Peter for his economic update. And I told Peter I'd be brief to maximize his time on stage, so here we go. First, Wells Fargo is very honored to continue to be the annual sponsor for the economic presentations as part of the Power Breakfast. There's probably no more important year for the economic updates than this year, given the questions and uncertainty in the global economy. And backed by popular demand, there's probably no better person to give us those insights than Peter. Peter is a professor emeritus of business at the University of Maryland. He's published weekly on MarketWatch, as well as the Washington Times and other publications and journals. His economic insights are sought regularly by BBC, Fox News, and other national news broadcasts. But more importantly, this will be Peter's third time on this stage addressing this crowd. He's a friend of the RV business. Please welcome Dr. Peter Morici.
Well, it's nice to be with you. Most of all, this thing working? It's nice to be back in Indiana. Right now, it's the vogue in Washington. You get this in every speech they make. For example, the National Security Advisor, Jack Sullivan, made a speech on foreign policy. So he talked about Republicans like to cut taxes, that's bad, and in a foreign policy speech, and that the market doesn't work. And when I hear that, and I get it a lot, especially off mic, because after all, the press does have a certain orientation. I said, have you been to Indiana? I mean, Indiana does all the things that you say don't work, and Indiana is growing, it's expanding, it's thriving, without all the drama that Florida has. Maybe, Lieutenant Governor, you need to create a little drama so people will pay attention to all the great things that are going on in Indiana. I congratulate you, and I'm delighted to be here. Now, let's see if I can make this work. Can we advance? There, okay. There we are. Now, we are in a period of slow growth. Since the second George Bush became president, through ups and downs, the economy has grown at about 2% a year. The Trump period up to the pandemic was a little better, but let's face it, it was only 3 years. They had a very large tax cut. They couldn't do that again. We really don't know what would have happened if he had been around a little longer, and if those policies had been with us longer before the pandemic. You know, they would talk about 3% growth. Really, these days, the question is whether it's going to be 2% over the cycle. The economy can only grow, I know economics is numbers and details and all that stuff, and I did it because my father was a football player and I wasn't big enough, so I had to do something. Is that the economy can't grow any faster than the sum of productivity and labor force growth. It's an iron law of the universe. Just like matter is neither created nor destroyed, you can't grow faster than the number of workers you have that you can potentially put to work and your productivity growth. If we compare before and after the pandemic, productivity growth has been so-so at 1.6% a year, and the labor force growth has been virtually zero. We have more people working simply because we put those available back to work, but as you know, we have hit the wall. The only real solutions to all of this is to boost productivity growth and to do things that would get us more workers. in terms of more workers, we underestimate how many frustrated young people we have because they're not adequately trained. I mean, let's face it. One of the most overrated and least productive sectors of our economy are post-high school education. I mean, we literally admit half of the students that we admit don't graduate, or if they do, they earn a wage that's lower or the same as they would earn as a high school graduate. All that for the privilege of spending $100,000 of somebody's money, some of which they borrow and have to pay back. We have to, if we're going to have a more productive economy, simply do a better job of focusing higher education, or shall I say post-secondary education, to skills. In some ways, artificial intelligence offers an opportunity because so many of the jobs that we have that are skilled are, kind of boring. And artificial intelligence offers us the opportunity to replace those boring jobs and offer people opportunities. Don't take, you don't have to go to 4 years of college to be a programmer. And the colleges would like you to believe you do, but you don't. We can create a lot of decent training opportunities that take about 6 months. And so those are some areas we need to look at. We face the following long cycle challenges. China, for all of its problems and authoritarianism, is really making some notable technological strides. Consider the electric vehicle. The Chinese are out ahead of General Motors. It's that simple. Tesla's a wonderful enterprise, but it's small. It's led by a somewhat eccentric individual who is not wholly focused. He doesn't modernize his models very often. He's having to cut prices very rapidly. We're behind in electric vehicles. We're behind in battery technology. We're maybe even on artificial intelligence. For all of our emphasis on chips, once the Chinese have the chips, they can do most things that we do pretty well. Militarily, they have those hypersonic missiles that can push a button in China and knock out an aircraft carrier 2,000 miles away. The Russians have them. We don't. We spend $700, $800 billion a year on defense. The Chinese and the Russians together less than half of that, but they have the capacity to knock out satellites. We don't. They have hypersonic missiles. We don't. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of things in our economy that look that way right now. And we need to do a better job of spending money more effectively so that we can compete. We simply do. It's not just Chinese subsidies. We have a lot of inefficient pockets in our economy that are not being addressed. Climate change, I don't think anybody fully reckons whether you're in favor of electric vehicles, getting rid of gas stoves, teaching people to eat grass instead of meat, cut out the middleman or the middle animal, or you want to basically harden the economy, build a seawall around Florida, cut California off the Nevada border and push it out to sea. Whichever school of, it's very expensive. It's extraordinarily expensive, and no one has really explained how we're going to pay for that. Energy rebalancing, replacing oil with lithium and cobalt requires us to go from one lousy place to another. So instead of dealing with the Saudi Arabians, we'll have to deal with the Congolese or the Argentines in the triangle in South America. Essentially, the things that we need most are in some of the most undesirable places on the planet for decent people to do business. And we're going to have to reckon with the fact that we just have to do business with undesirable and indecent people if we're going to be able to get from point A to point B, something with 4 wheels and a steering wheel. It's going to be hard to accept, but we're going to have to do it. Our declining birth rate has to be addressed. This is a very delicate subject. Whenever I address it, people get angry with me. But our birth rate, well, the Chinese have a low birth rate. So do we. It's not quite as bad, but it's getting bad. Our birth rate is well below 2.1 per woman, which basically means without immigration, we cannot reproduce our population, our labor force, and so forth. So we have a very aging population in time, which will require a lot of care and not people to make stuff. You can ask people to work longer, but it's kind of hard to ask them to work past 70 or 75. You simply start to run out of days that you're not seeing doctors. I basically, people say, how often do you speak? And I say, I used to do it about once a month. Now I do it once every other month. So what happens the other months? Instead of seeing doctors. In any case, we need to do something about that. Immigration sounds like an easy solution. It's not. It takes about 2 generations to absorb an immigrant family into American culture. If you just think of the lady you know at the dry cleaner that takes in dry cleaning, who sent her kid to the University of Minnesota, Indiana University, the University of Maryland, and they become an engineer. If you look at most families, they're like the guy who cleans my house. The guy who cleans my house, he came as a boy from Central America. He runs a small crew. He has a small business. His son went in the Air Force. His son will go to the University of Maryland. If I look back on my Italian family, basically from the time my grandfather got off the boat to the first college graduate with a Morici last name, with a surname, was about 60 years. Some other families in the group, it was 40. It takes about 2 generations to turn a family into, quote, fully American, up to speed, advanced industrialized country type of. Most of the children are getting university training, doing very productive and skilled things. In the meantime, society bears a heavy cost in providing those opportunities because they're not self-financing. Middle-class children are just a very efficient way for a society to reproduce itself. Immigrants are a less efficient way, which means immigration policy should be focused on the best vets we can get, the most skilled people we can get, people to fill the gaps, and it shouldn't be randomized as it is today on the border. I was asked to say something. I'm trying to focus today on long-run challenges. I was asked to say something about the banks. I'm going to give you the banks real quick so I can stay on story. Essentially, coming out of the global financial crisis, where a lot of bad loans were made, loans that should have never been made, we have really ratcheted up lending standards and to some extent capital requirements. The reality is that the banks have not been lending out all their deposits or anywhere near their deposits. Instead, what they've been doing is investing in treasury securities, of which we print many, and investing in mortgage-backed securities because they have an implicit government guarantee, of which we print many. So it wasn't just the Silicon Valley Savings and Loan or Republic Bank with its zero-interest mortgages. About 30 or 40% of the banks out there, which are mostly regional banks, are loaded up with bonds. Sooner or later, the federal government, the Federal Reserve, has to raise interest rates to deal with inflation. It's a cyclical thing. Even if they go back down, they'll go back up again. When that happens, as you know from your finance departments, the sale value of those bonds, even if the par value to maturity doesn't change, goes down. And if you need the money to meet depositors' demands, you've got a problem. If depositors get it in their head that you don't have adequate marketable assets, and they get on the internet and they talk to each other, they run to the bank. We're hearing a lot in Washington, as we always, there's certain things that if you just pull the string, the bell goes off. One of them is, what do we know about the banks? Higher capital requirements. Last January, Silicon Valley Bank had about $210 billion, it was approximate, in assets and liabilities. In one day, they lost over $40 billion in deposits. There are no capital requirements large enough to protect the bank against that. Simply because if you held half of your deposit, if you had 50% of your deposits backed up by capital, remember, it's doing nothing. If you can't put it in bonds, it's doing nothing. You can't possibly provide banking services and loans at reasonable rates if you're going to have that much idle funds. More than that, when Citibank got in trouble in 2008, it had more than adequate capital. Silicon Valley Bank's problem wasn't capital. It was simply it held too many bonds. It was at the outer edge of holding too many bonds. What really happened and what went wrong at Silicon Valley Bank was two things. The San Francisco Fed bank examiners saw the balance sheet and did nothing. It was said to me last night at dinner, well, it's terribly complex. No, if an economist that teaches school can understand reading the balance sheet, surely a bank examiner should be able to read the balance sheet. On page 92 of its SEC filing is the balance sheet. And you could see the number of bonds being held par that were below water, that were below, below market. The market value was below par. It was very, very obvious. Last January, nothing was done about it. The second thing is, it is the nature of banking to have this problem in the interest rate cycle, whether you're dealing with loans or bonds. There has to be a facility where you can go and basically borrow at par so that you can have money when you need it. That's why the Federal Reserve was established. It was a place where banks could go and borrow money against the loans they had made. But in those days, loans were mostly short-term. The Federal Reserve has now established for a period of 1 year such a facility. That has to be made permanent. That's really the only way out. The other is that there was some capacity for the Silicon Valley Bank to borrow the money. They could have gone to the Federal Home Loan Bank in San Francisco. They went late in the day of the $40 billion run. In order for the Federal Home Loan Bank to lend a bank money, it has to go sell some bonds. It doesn't have cash on hand. They came too late in the day to float the bonds, because you could sell bonds real fast. They came too late in the day to sell the bonds to bail out Silicon Valley Bank. That's simple. It was the absence of a place to borrow money against good U.S. Treasury securities. The Fed issued its report. It did what Democratic Feds always do when they're in and the Republicans are out, or Republican Feds do when they're in and the Democrats are out. What did they do? They blamed their predecessors. The person most responsible is the CEO of the Federal Reserve. The one person that didn't take adequate responsibility on that day was Jay Powell. He runs a very bureaucratic structure. He's the ultimate Washington swamp rat. He is. That's how he got the job. He's the ultimate political operative. And basically, it was too bureaucratic. The information was percolating up for 3 months from the San Francisco Fed that there was a problem, and nothing was done about it. It was Fed inaction that caused the Silicon Valley Bank. The Silicon Valley Bank provided an important and vital function. It understands the startup community better than any other institution. It made loans. More, it got repaid. Though it weren't the extend and pretend loans on its books. So much so that the next day, Apollo Capital wanted to buy the loan book. The people at Apollo Capital are not stupid. They don't buy loan books if the book is full of loans about to fail. Unfortunately, out of all this comes a problem. That vital institution, which actually understood the startup community, closed. Now, I'd like to leave banks for a minute and go back to the long-term challenges. I have to say that Joe Biden is the most successful president we have had since Ronald Reagan, in the sense that he has been able to put in place more of his policy initiatives than the two Bushes, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. If you reflect on their administrations, they all got one good bite, and they all generally got one thing they really wanted. Perhaps not even Clinton got one, because he didn't get his health care, but he got some other accomplishments. When you look at the string of things this guy's done, the Infrastructure Act, the American Rescue Plan, the CHIPS and Science Act, these things are very notable achievements from the point of view of legislative victories. And it's a testimony to Democratic discipline on the Hill. Because they had majorities, but they were narrow majorities, and they got them through. Most presidents just don't get this kind of success. So basically, he's dramatically increased the federal deficit because he's going to create a semiconductor supply chain in the United States, a battery supply chain in the United States, and so forth in response to the things the Chinese are doing. The problem with this is the budget deficit is now much larger. The national debt is on track to be about 200% of GDP by the mid-2030s. Once it gets over 100%, what that means is if the nominal rate of interest on long-term Treasury securities is as high as the nominal rate of growth, you have to borrow money to just pay the interest. We're getting to the point where the federal government will have to borrow money to pay interest and then maybe to increase the debt as well. So the confrontation that's going on in Washington is about a real issue. Because in the president's budget, for example, there's no provision to deal with Social Security running out of money in 2032. When asked about that very directly, they respond with, the biggest threat to Social Security is Republicans that want to cancel it. Does anybody here know a Republican that wants to get rid of Social Security? Raise your hand. It's like saying the Democrats don't care about national defense. That's nonsense. They do. What's going on right now is a very important and difficult confrontation. The debt has to be addressed. We've run out of room. Now, if we don't address the debt that way, what will happen is we will be printing bonds to pay the interest on the bonds. It'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. Bonds are liquidity. They're not money, but they're close to liquidity. Because after all, since the dollar is the international unit of account, all international corporations hold dollars. But they don't hold dollars. They hold treasury securities that they can sell. So think of it this way. If a dollar is, is money, right? Global money, then a U.S. Treasury security is worth 75 cents on a dollar as global money. And so what we have learned over the last 3 years is if you print too much money, what do you get? Inflation. That's an outdated idea in this West Wing. It was also an outdated idea in the last West Wing. The principal difference is one group wants to spend money, wants to print money to spend more money. The other one wants to print more money to cut taxes. I mean, you had to sit at the White. I went to the White House. I sat down in the West Wing with Kudlow and his gang, and they had a chief economist there that was saying that if you cut taxes, it will pay for itself with growth. If you believe that, I have a physicist with a perpetual motion machine. Okay, so the consequences of all this is that for the foreseeable future, we have growth possibility of less than 2%. Inflation will be well above 3% going forward. The chairman of the Federal Reserve last week said that inflation expectations are well grounded. They're anchored. Okay. The New York Federal Reserve surveys consumers once a month. They are putting the average consumer's inflation expectation next year at 4.5%. The Conference Board surveys consumers every month. They're putting it at 6.7. They're anchored, but they're anchored in the wrong place. We're seeing now businesses building into their expectations that prices will go up each year rather than the need to keep their costs down because they won't be able to raise their prices. When I was a young man, this is like 1978, I did a brief stint in the government. It didn't go very well, I have to say. I guess I'm just not cut out to be a bureaucrat in the Department of Energy. But this is a very typical. What happened is, I sat down with them and I said, what do you want? He says, I want $26,000 a year because that's what I would earn if I got a promotion in the government, which I will get eventually. I said, okay, we can pay you $26,000 a year. He says, what else do you want? I says, you have a 3-year waiting period on the pension. That gets waived. Because I'm going to move around a lot. 3-year waiting periods mean I'm going to be broke when I'm old. So I already lost 3 years at Augsburg College in Minneapolis. I'm not losing 3 years. Okay, we can do that. What else do you want? I says, when do I get my first raise? Is it at least 10%? Why are you asking that? You haven't done anything for me. I said, well, it's simple. At the rate of inflation we have outside right now, I know that I'm going to be 10% poorer in a year. They hired me despite that. Arrogant little. Anyway, through these people, I got to meet all kinds of important people. One of them was Paul Volcker. I was up at the Treasury with him, and he explained the same thing to me. I was talking to my daughter. She's buying a house. She's going to pay 11% mortgage. She says, why are you doing that? Oh, inflation's going to be 12% next year, 14% after that. I says, well, Mr. Volcker, what are you going to do? He says, Peter, the axe is coming down. He said, this is going to happen. I says, no, you're really, he says, yes, I am. And 2 weeks later, the interest rates start going up. I know that this process with the interest rates is very painful, but there's 2 ways to deal with this. One is to take the medicine and get rid of inflation, and the other is to sort of, raise interest rates a little bit for a while, then ease off the pedal to wait and see what happens next, and so on like that. That's exactly what they did in the 70s, and inflation ratcheted from 2 to 4 to 6, and then it'll go back down to 4, then 8, then it'll go back down to 6. It was up and down, but the trend line was always the same. When poor Mr. Volcker took over, it was like 10, 12%. To put these interest rate increase in perspective, at its peak, we had inflation of about 10%. He has now raised interest rates to 5. That's half of that. Volcker was facing interest rates of inflation rates of 10 or 12. He ended up with raising the federal funds rate to 18%. That's what has to be done. That's what has to be done. In this morning's Wall Street Journal, Greg Ip has a column. Everybody reads Greg Ip in Washington. He's the second brightest economist on the planet, I will acknowledge. You don't get ahead in Washington by putting a pot over your candle. It's simply the name of the game. The first thing you say in the morning when you get up to your wife or your husband is, aren't I the smartest that you... And the inflation expectations are baking in. And the Wall Street Journal's money page says, and economy page says, is that if there's ever a place where you will find the conventional wisdom, it's there. That's the basic problem. People have now come to expect inflation. So the real solutions are going to be doing something about higher education, doing something about entitlements, doing something about the federal deficit, and taking the medicine on it. This administration won't do this. They'll lean on Powell not to do it. They have been successful on, we know on history that Powell can be leaned on. Because last year they leaned on him with his reappointment and he caved. Now, Biden is appointing people with marginal credentials, but adhere quite clearly. Appointing a labor economist to the Federal Reserve to make monetary policy is like going to an ear, nose, and throat guy to deal with a heart problem. Just because they have a PhD from an important university and they wrote about patent discrimination in the 19th century does not mean they know anything about monetary policy. But they all have as an article of faith that money doesn't matter, you can print as much as you want and there won't be any consequences to damn what goes on outside. I'd swear the windows are painted black at the Federal Reserve right now. They can't see outside. But we know that's going to happen. As a consequence, 2024 is really going to be slogged out much like the Reagan-Carter election, depending on who the Republicans nominate. If they nominate Donald Trump, it's a gift to Joe Biden, because then he'd be able to campaign against Trump and all of the really unfortunate things he has done. It'll again be a character race, a decent person against an indecent person. Say what you want of Joe Biden and his son, the Republicans have never been able to turn that into an issue. It's only the fringe, people that watch Newsmax and, that can turn that into an issue. So, if the Republicans can get someone up there like a Nikki Haley, and if Nikki Haley can learn to articulate this way and develop some fire, then you can hammer him on, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Let me conclude with this. Who in this room today is better off than they were just before the pandemic? Raise your hand. There's one. Did you raise your hand? You went like this and pulled it down. Okay, is there anybody? That's what you have to campaign on. What that means for your industry is that I need to go up here, is that we're likely looking at sustained inflation. Okay, we're going to have a recession this year. This is the forecast. And we'll have a recovery next year. But for the foreseeable future, I see us looking at inflation of around 4%. My 2024 inflation number is 3.8%. My unemployment number is 4.1. So you're looking at basically an inflationary environment, growth around 2% a year after you have a recovery year next year. And interest rates at about the level you're at now. Because they'll go back up. They'll go down and they'll go back up again. Because they'll have to. Now, the good news about interest rates is it only hurts when you're going up. Once you've been up and you're there, it's much more manageable. Because after all, we have lived with much higher interest rates in the past. The stock market has gone up. People have bought and sold houses. They've traveled around in RVs. The world has not come to an end. But you'll be dealing with an inflationary environment. As the world is cyclical, look at the red numbers. This year is not a good year. Probably next year should be better for your industry. You should sell a few more RVs. But likely you'll have to wait for 2024 to be selling more RVs, getting the price points you want, and so forth. The biggest problems that I think you face is most of our large companies, the Winnebagos, the General Motors, the Procter & Gamble's, have been hardened and strengthened by the years of the global financial crisis. They can weather the storm pretty well. Dealers, in not just your industry, but in others, are in somewhat better shape. But still, the real pressure points in the industry for you are going to be the people that, independent operators of campgrounds, your dealers, and their bankers, to the extent they rely on smaller banks, because they're going to be more vulnerable to these changes, and it's going to take time as they fall off the map for new ones to come on the map, or as they change hands. It's going to be very difficult over the next year, for example, for campgrounds to invest. It's going to be very difficult for dealers to invest in more training programs, which you saw, and for technicians and so forth. So, that's where the pressure points are in the industry, and that's how I see the future for you. I know they call economics the dismal science, and I guess I've kind of lived up to that today. But I've always been pretty honest with you about the challenges you see, and that's how I see it. I'd be happy to take your questions. Please don't tell me I'm that intimidating. I know I'm from New York, I'm a Sicilian, but look, no rod. I don't carry a gun, honest. Can we get a question? Yeah. Oh, look, the Fed can print money. They have infinite liquidity. The thing about the Fed is all it has to do to create money is to buy bonds. When it buys bonds, it creates liquidity. And so the only problem the Fed has is if it buys bonds and then through its own interest rate increases, their value goes down and it has to. But at the rate it's selling bonds right now, given the size of its balance sheet, which is around $5 trillion, it's selling about $95 billion a month. It can sell. It's selling on the long end of the yield curve, and it's really not selling. It's just letting the mortgage-backed securities and treasuries it has on the longer end fall off. You know, it's redeeming them. So they don't have a liquidity problem. Other questions? And what happens if I sprout rings, become 26 years old again? I'll play shortstop for the New York Yankees. The question was, what happens if the yuan becomes the global standard? Remember, in order for the yuan to become the global standard, people have to feel comfortable holding Chinese government bonds in their corporations, international multinationals have to feel comfortable about the security of holding Chinese government bonds in their treasuries. Do you think that's about to happen? I don't think the dollar is particularly threatened because Japan is an old folks' home. Europe is always under threat of breaking up. The Eurozone is always under threat of breaking up. And China runs a terribly authoritarian regime. But let me give you a little perspective on this. The debt of the Chinese provincial governments, which the federal government has to back up, is 200% of GDP. Whatever our debt problems are, theirs are bigger because they do most of their borrowing through the provincial governments. And a lot of these things look like SIBs from the financial crisis. They're off the books and whatnot. The Chinese do not have a sound financial system, so it is not a good currency to be keeping your corporate assets in. And the other thing is, we all know that you can wake up on any morning and the Chinese government can take away what you have. At least here you can take the federal government to court. Another question? Oh, come on now. This is like teaching freshman economics at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know? I thought I gave that up. Well, listen, I'll be back. Oh, you have something? Okay, I'll be back here in a little while, and we'll have a little rump session, and you can sit close and, you know, ask the questions you like, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. But let me just say, I always find it indeed a privilege and an honor and a great pleasure to be with you in Indiana. To me, this is God's country. God bless you.
Peter, thank you. If only we could all have the outlook and the depth of knowledge that you possess in your field, it certainly helps us understand the overall economic picture better. And again, let me remind you that in 10 or 15 minutes after we dismiss, Peter will be back up here to answer questions and or intermix with people. So we'll look forward to having Peter back. As a reminder, there's a couple things. We saw people taking pictures of slides and so forth, which is fine. This has been live recorded and will be available on the RV Business YouTube channel if you want to look at any parts of it. It's there for your access. Secondly, on behalf of the organizing committee, all the sponsors, the presenters, B.J. Thompson and Associates, and RV Business Magazine, thank you so much for being here this morning. We wish you all the very best in the days ahead. Be safe and God bless.